Hey, it's Doug from Rise Above Performance Training. And if you struggle with a weak back or occasionally get injured in your low back, I have some training strategies for you in this video. Let's check it out. So I have 5 strategies that you want to consider to add into your training to help build up your low back and core strength. Now, this isn't a guarantee that you'll never get an injury again. Occasionally I tweak my back too, just either sneezing or turning the wrong way or training. But we want to build up a strong back, so if we do injure it, it's not really dire and you can recover quickly. And also, if you're playing sports, you won't get those consistent back injuries. And if you have chronic back injuries where it's just dull pain for a long time or daily when you wake up, these will potentially help you out as well. Now, if you have a really bad back injury where you have spinal compression on the nerve, consult the doctor obviously before you do some of these things. And definitely look into it with a physical therapist and a doctor to help you relieve that pain and get you in the right direction. So the first thing we're going to talk about is doing mobility. I see a lot of older people, older athletes kind of neglect this. When you're younger, you're a little more pliable, you can kind of get away with it. But I incorporate personally about 5 minutes at least of mobility, especially in the hip area, before I work out. And they can be very simple. If you do it daily, you don't have to do a ton of them. But if you do it, once a year, you're going to kind of be behind the ball and it's going to be a little bit harder to catch up. Some of the mobility I like is especially in the hip. So the hip is kind of the junction of that low back and the connection between the upper and lower body. So we want to make sure that is pliable. The first thing I like to do are pelvic tilts, and that is, I have this arch, natural lumbar arch, which most people have in their bodies, and we're just going to flatten by pulling our belly button down. Now I don't have that arch and I can't put my hand through there. It's kind of hard for some people to do that. And then I'll make an arch. Now I just want to go right to where I feel a little bit of resistance. And I do want to focus primarily on that flattening or the tucking more so than the arch, but definitely do both ways and do a few of those. The next one I like to do are lateral hip shifts. So I want to be on all fours. I'm going to tuck, so I'm going to kind of keep that flat low back premise. So I'm going to tuck, have my head neutral, slightly retracted, and I'm gently going to shift side to side. Again, I'm just kind of what I call knocking on the door of tightness. I don't want to move my whole body because that's kind of defeating the purpose. I want to push out without arching my low back. I want to keep that tuck and shift side to side. So the more I can get the muscles surrounding the hips looser, the better. One that is often missed is rotation of the hips, especially internal rotation, going inward with the hip. So a good way to practice this one is seated. I'm going to be seated and I'm going to drop a knee inward and then come back. And I'm going to have my hands behind me for a little bit of support. If you're a little more flexible, you can do it without your hands behind you and just shifting inward. The reason why you want your hips mobile is if they're not mobile, you're going to take a lot more stress on the low back because your range of motion is going to stop, let's say during a squat. So if I go to squat and I don't have that hip mobility, and then all of a sudden I'll probably bend over more and put more stress on the lumbar and the low back. So really build up that hip mobility, especially if you're going to do hip work that day. Lastly, we're going to do some hip pries. So you can do things, if you need a little support, you can pry by pushing outward. So I'm going to externally rotate going outward. Or if you're good, you can wedge your arms in, chest up, and then shift around side to side. You can get a little bit more inward and shift around, prying as you squat and getting lower. So after you have the mobility going, you want to build up strength, obviously. Again, the hips, kind of the powerhouse of the body, the stronger they are within that mobility and the flexibility, the less low back strain you're going to have. So one I think that people neglect because they think it's a remedial or a physical therapy type exercise is a hip bridge. So just doing this even as a warm-up is a great way to get the hips going and learn to get extension. I'm going to do that flattening again. Have my feet about squat stance apart so I feel like I'm in a squat position. And I'm going to push to the floor, squeeze my glutes, and then try to get flat at the top. So I'm very tight right here. So I'm getting that hip extension and then controlling down. If you can't get your hips flat or if you're coming up with pain, you got to do a few more of these. Now, here you want about a shoe and a half distance apart. So you'll know if you're too far away, you won't get very high. If you're too close, you'll get jammed up as well. So you want to find that optimal range for you. Also, I'm gently pushing the knees out like that prying movement to get my hips going and primed for the workout. You can also do single leg version, and what we don't want to do is drop the hips, so this is a little bit more challenging. But those are a good way to get the body going and also work on that hip extension and build up the back strength. The other strength things you guys probably all know is doing deadlifts, squats, and definitely single leg work. And do what's appropriate for you. So if you haven't squatted in a long time, I wouldn't go to a barbell. Try a kettlebell, try some body weight work. Same thing with deadlifts. You know, try some light kettlebell work before you go to a barbell or anything beyond that. Step ups, lunges, body weight stuff works very well, and it helps balance out the strength on the both sides so you build up your back strength evenly. Now the third thing we're going to talk about is building up your core strength. And I'm going to build up my core strength, you know, sometimes we think about it dynamically with sit-ups or medicine ball throws or some type of movements like that. But you want to focus on anti-rotation or stability exercises where you're staying static. Things like planks, we all know those, front, side, even back ones, which are a little bit harder. Those are great for that, building up that stability in the core. Now, if we're doing a front plank, I do recommend, you know, getting in good position and tightening your glutes a little bit to protect that low back. So just keep that in mind. But most of you guys know those movements. Add those in. You know, if you're doing let's say a set of bench press, you can add a 30-second plank in, no problem. Now, other ones that, again, like the hip bridge might be a little bit more remedial in your mind would be therapy exercises like the bird dog and the dead bug. So the bird dog I like, we're going to tuck our tailbone, retract our head. Now you can do a bunch of ways. You can start with your arm and see if you can stay stable, and I'm going to settle here and go. That's kind of the beginner way. The next way would be extending your leg. Now when we extend all the way, we don't want to lose that arch. So that's where that core control and stability comes in. And I'll reset down, pushing out and in. Lastly, we want to work up to tuck, retract. I want to extend through the heel, opposite arm and leg, and then coming back in, I'll reset, opposite arm and leg. So I'm not rotating, I'm not losing that tuck. And it is okay to go, you know, part way out if you feel yourself going longer and losing that. Going slower is a lot harder, and going smoother is a lot harder. So try to be smooth and try to move at the same time while you're doing those. Another one is the reverse of that, is the dead bug. So I'll be on my back, flatten my low back, knees up to 90. Now, a good way to start is just to do some heel taps. And when I'm going down, I'm not losing that arch. So I'm not creating an arch here. I'm keeping my low back flat. So if you can't do that, you're going to stick with this until you can. Next would be extending through the heel, maintaining that low back arch. I'm pulling gently forward towards my nose, on the opposite leg I should say, so that way I'm keeping that balance. Lastly, much like the bird dog, we're going to add the opposite arm and leg. So my arm is up, low back is flat. I'm going to reach through my fingers and elbow, extending the opposite leg, not losing that low back arch. I'm keeping it tight, smoothly coming back to the middle. If I need to reset my low back, I will. Reaching through, staying tight, and coming back. Now, what I'm not doing too is when my right arm is moving, my left arm is not dropping with it. I'm trying to keep everything on its own side and isolating those opposite sides. So that is a good way to build up that low back stability and anti-rotation. Another way is just getting a band. You can get these pretty cheap, Perform Better or something like that. And you can do things like, you know, pal off holds, Pal-off presses, a little bit of churns, and things like that to kind of create that stability and anti-rotation. We just talked about anti-rotation for stability. Now we're going to talk about actually rotating to increase the strength through a range of motion. Now, you're not going to just load up a barbell or grab a big medicine ball and start rotating your body to build up the strength. We can do it through mobility first and then add the strength component down the road when you start feeling good. One thing I like to do is rotate my upper back or the thoracic area, again, to help alleviate above and below that low back area. You can go on all fours, tuck your tailbones to your neutral, retract your head, hand gently across the head, and we're going to rotate elbow to elbow, and then I'm going to rotate following with my eyes. Now what I don't want to do is lift, so lift's not helping me out a ton. I want to rotate, and I should feel a stretch in my upper back and rib cage area. And as I go along, I'll get a little further. Also, I'm not losing that low back stability. I'm keeping that stable and tight. You can also do this on your side, having the arms out, knees up. I'm going to keep my hips removing and I'm going to rotate my upper body. So I don't want to do this. I want to keep everything stable, follow with my eyes, okay if my head moves a little bit, and I'm going to change angles. I'm actually, when I'm getting my hand behind here, I'm pushing down to keep myself from rolling in my hips. I'm counter rolling my hips forward and keep my arms down as I open up and change angles there. Now we talked about above the area. Now we want to go below the area and rotate the hips themselves. So all fours, tuck, and then you're just going to make a hip circle. Probably the easier way to do it is to extend. Do not lose that arch, so keep that arch. Rotate externally and then sweep through. So you want to think about tracing the ground with your knee. You can also go out, abduct, rotate internally and come through here. It's a little bit harder. I tend to have people do both directions. But the more we mobilize the hip with rotation and the upper back with rotation, it'll alleviate that junction point in the low back. A good way to add resistance into it is to go back to our band and you can start adding core rotations here. So you can have your arms out, whatever hand you want, shoulders down, and I'm going to move through that core. So I'm not really pulling with my arms, I'm gently rotating. I like to lift my inside knee so I don't crank or torque that joint. And I'm also slow on the way back, learning to decelerate that rotation. So rotational athletes, pitchers, volleyball, golf, you want to build up that mobility and then strengthen it with something like this going forward. Lastly, we want to recover. So we just did a workout. We want to make sure that things don't tighten up, so we can do a few stretches to help alleviate that. Few that I like that are simple is doing, the first one would be a cannonball, where I'm just bringing my knees to my chest, head down, relaxing everything, and I'm just rocking side to side, making small circle rocks, and just keeping those lumbar vertebrae mobile before they tighten up after a workout. Hamstrings, another great one. So straighten up here, keeping the other leg down. You can pull and relax. You can change angles a little bit, but you want to make sure your hamstrings are loose as well. If you can only lift it to here, that's going to tighten up your low back. You should be able to lift it about 90 degrees passively to have a good low back flexibility. This one, probably my favorite, is the piriformis stretch. We're going to go figure 4, and I'm going to reach through, grab my inside leg here, and just pull. And then when I get to my end range, I'll relax there and just breathe and see if I can pull a little further and pull. That muscle in there in the glute and the piriformis, the triangular muscle, gets very tight and can turn and torque the hips, and that can cause a lot of back pain because it just kind of twists them in a different direction and just inhibits their movement. Lastly, the one I like is a hip flexor. I call this the watching TV stretch because you can watch TV and do it. When we sit all day, this muscle here gets short, and then that'll kick the hip and cause some back tightness. It'll shorten the back, cause some tightness here. So we want to elongate this and alleviate the back here, the muscles tightness here. So if I lengthen here, that's going to allow these muscles to relax a little bit. So I'm going to tuck, sink. Now, if you want to add, this is a good one for the up higher, the psoas and the iliacus. You can brace here and add a reach, kicking the hip out, gently stretching all the way through here and relieving those muscles after your workout to help you recover better and not have them tighten up. So I want to thank you for watching today. Hopefully those things help you out and keep you, back pain free going forward with your training. If you like the video, please like it down below. Also consider subscribing. We've been putting a new video out every week and we're trying to keep that going. So thanks again for all your support and we'll see you next time.